So at the end of book four, or at the end of this excerpt from book four, um, sort of get the, the conclusion of the argument, and that is that, okay, the human self is divided up into these three parts. The rational part, or the part that thinks, the spirited part, or the part that wills, you might say, parts of self-will or willpower, and then the desires, the wants, the cravings, the urges that we as a particular type of animal have. The conclusion at the end of the excerpt is that not only are these the three parts of the self, but that, like the city upon which they're based, the class structure, that's hierarchical. That is, it's not that just that these are the three parts of ourselves. It's that the parts should be ordered in a certain way, a certain hierarchy. And that's why I'm putting the arrows there. That the rational part should rule over the rest. And that if you want to see it, I think in the simplest terms, that the rational part should rule over the desires. That the human being is essentially, should be a rational creature. That the thinking part deserves to rule over the rest. And in fact, the just person is, by definition, from what Plato says, what Socrates says here, the just person is the rational person insofar as within the just person, the rational part rules over the rest. As he says here on page 16, right here, and ought not the rational principle, which is wise and has the care of the whole soul, to rule, and the passionate or spirited principle to be the subject and ally. And then he says, and these two, thus nurtured and educated, and having learned truly to know their own functions, will rule over the concupiscent. The concupiscent is a fancy Latin term for the desiring part of us that has desires, which in each of us is the largest part of the soul, and by nature most insatiable of gain. And over this they will keep guard. So for Socrates, the just person is the person whose rational part rules over his desires. The unjust person, the disordered person, is the person who has that reversed, whose desires call the shots. It is perhaps the most extensively argued, colorful, and brilliant exposition of the general idea that human beings are rational animals. That is, they are animals who have the ability to think and reason and know truth, and that part of them, their intellect, is the most distinctive, and that to be a well-ordered human being is to have that thinking part in control of the rest. I included an excerpt from book 9, which I'd like you to read as well, and it's later on in the Republic, but it gives us this great picture where he says the human. You can read it for yourself. He says basically, think of the human being. Think of a human being, and then think of within that human being there being three other animals: a human being, another human being, a lion, and then a multi-headed beast. And clearly, those three things are meant to describe the rational part, which would be the human being within the human being. The spirited part, which is the lion, the strong-willed, spirited part of us. And then the multi-headed beast, which is the desires. Multi-headed because we have so many and so varied desires that are constantly changing, some popping up and others going away. And it says, well, that's what it means to be a human being. Socrates says, to have these three things within you. The human within you, the rational part, the lion within you, the spirited part, and the multi-headed beast within you, your desires, and the idea of a successful human life, or being a successful human being, is having the human part rule. And of course, it is begging the question. But it's by begging the question, I mean simply he's assuming something that he really should have to prove. And what he should have to prove is that the rational part is the most human part of us. And maybe the book as a whole does that, but we have to spend a lot more time talking about it and reading it. But there's the assertion here is that the truly human part of human nature, that is what makes it distinctively human, what makes us distinctively human, is our ability to think, to reason, and to know truth. The rest of us is parts that we share with the rest of the animal world. And they are important parts of us. They are undeniably part of human nature, but they're not the part of human nature that is most distinctive, nor are they the part that should, so to speak, call the shots in human life. That is, that in a truly human life, it's the rational part, reason, that will rule over the rest. This is just a snapshot of one book, and just a snapshot of one overall but very broad and influential view of human nature. For the purposes of this discussion, we can call it the rationalist view. The rationalist view is the view that the rational part of human beings is the most important and defining part, and that if you're interested in sort of figuring out how to live your own individual life, that, unlike most of the world, what you should be thinking about is how to get your mind in order and in control of the rest of you. That is, to be a well-ordered person, to be a truly human person, is to have the intellect, the rational part, reason, in control of the rest. This is a very broad and influential view in Western culture, civilization, and philosophy of human nature. We can call it the rationalist view. In some ways, as we'll see in 20th century philosophy or Darwinian view, it all comes into question. But in a way, this is Plato's particular take on what I would say is the standard Western philosophical model for human nature, at least to the extent that human beings are supposed to be reasonable creatures, supposed to be rational creatures.